Welcome to the year 2020 Conversation with Communicators series, the second seminar that we have. I am Mike Wong, Professor of Practice in Journalism and Communications. Today, we are so honored to have the presence of Mr. Edward Bell joining our discussion. Ed is a good friend and also ex-colleague. He currently is responsible for the development of brand strategy, consumer insights, loyalty marketing, as well as marketing communications for the Cathay Pacific Group globally. Ed actually has spent the majority of his career in marketing strategy and later as the CEO for a marketing services consultant covering Asia and Greater China, and working for diverse brands and also business. As a seasoned marketing professional, Ed is well known for his strong strategy and also creative input for the business. He was recipient of numerous prestigious awards, including IPA and J. Triad Awards for marketing effectiveness and strategy. Ed originally came from Melbourne, Australia, but coincidentally, he fell in love with Hong Kong. He also fell in love with his wife, and he rested for the last 10-something years, having a great career in Hong Kong and Greater China with his wife and his children, 3 children. Today's topic is called The Year That Flew By. When we talk about this line, I almost felt sentimental for obvious reasons, right? Because we are talking about the new normal. We are arguing if it is really a situation of doom and gloom for us in a lot of industry. Aviation, obviously, not an exception. And aviation as a key enablers of human connections and communications, we do want to discuss about the possibility of a future and what kind of future. I do not have a crystal ball, but we obviously do hope for the best, a return of travel. But if travel does return, which I'm sure it will, in what form and shape will human connection and communication through aviation actually will become? I think that's something that we will actually discuss with Ed, and he will share with us as an industry expert. So without further ado, I will hand over the floor to Ed, who will share with us the years that flew by, understanding the COVID-19 challenge for aviation. Ed, please.
Thank you, Mike, and it's lovely to be with you again. And thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be here at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And as you say, I'm very fond of Hong Kong. My wife is from Hong Kong, and I consider myself an honorary Hong Konger.
Yeah, I consider you part of us.
Yeah. Yeah. So as Mike said, well, thank you to everyone for joining as well and taking an interest in this topic. I think it's such an interesting topic because as Mike has said, I think we've all become so ingrained with travel. It's become so much a part of our lives. We almost take it for granted. And what's so fascinating about the COVID challenge, I think it's caused us to re-examine our relationship with travel and to think about what it means actually for us. You know, is it about getting from A to B, or is it something more? So that's what I'm going to try and unpick a little bit. Although I think we're still very much in the middle of this whole thing. It's not like we're at the end of it. So I might switch to the slides. The year that flew by. We're not quite at the end of the year, but pretty close. I think we're days away from Christmas trees coming out. So I'm calling it the end of the year. Rightio. So here's what I'm going to take you through. There's 3 sections to my brief presentation that we can talk through and discuss. The first one is a scene setting. It's just how travel has changed, which I find fascinating. Secondly, I want to share some perspectives about what we think that we've learned at Cathay about what people want and how they understand travel. And then thirdly, some speculation about what it means for the future. Okay, moving right along. The golden days. I think you have to start here. This is just a picture off the internet, but my first memory of travel didn't come from me. It came from my grandmother. I was about 10, and I remember being at her house, and my grandmother and my grandfather had just come back from a holiday to, I think it was Hawaii or Tahiti or something. And what was amazing was that there were more photos of my grandmother descending the stairs from the airplane than there were of the beach, the destination where they'd been to.
Yeah.
Because air travel back then was rare, and it was romantic. It was an extraordinary thing by virtue of the fact it was so expensive. And you know, look at these crazy wide seats. Of course it's expensive. And you know, that's how things were back in those days. In the 70s, which is where I'm talking about, it cost about $600 to fly from one coast to the other coast return. In today's money, $600. Now, if you flip to today, what's happened is with competition and deregulation of the industry, the cost of travel has come down by 50% in real terms since those days. And what that's done is it's totally opened it up because our incomes have climbed significantly since those days. But so travel as a percentage of our disposable income and the actual cost of travel is half what it was in those days. So as a result of that, we've totally changed the way that we travel. We now travel, you know, back in those days, it was like, you know, my grandmother's taking this big trip was such a big deal. Nowadays, we fly to Bangkok from Hong Kong almost as a substitute for maybe going to see a movie.
Yeah.
You know, or the cost, you know, I think you could fly Bangkok from Hong Kong about $1,700 would be a cheap end fare. Now that's a dinner, a fancy dinner, albeit, but it's a dinner for a few friends. That's probably what it would cost. So for the cost of a dinner, you can fly to another country and have a weekend. So that's extraordinary. And so now it's just become part of our daily lives. And as I say, you know, my hypothesis is we don't even really think about it. We just do it. It's become part of who we are. But of course, the reason why it's the year that we all wish just flew by and disappeared is because today is just another time from those busy days where we would fly in the end of 2019 about 100,000 passengers a day. Today, we're flying about 1,100 passengers a day. And it's a sorry sight. And what you have is extraordinary infrastructure. These beautiful, you know, one of the world's best airports we have at Bangkok, and it's an amazingly designed airport. All this space and so few people, it just breaks your heart because it's something that's built to work, and it's not getting used. And you know, it's also not just that. It's at Cathay City where I work, which is a building close to the airport. When I first started working there in 2017, I got that feeling. I don't know if people know this movie, you know, Catch Me If You Can, but it's, you know, this is not exactly how it is at Cathay City. People don't want to give you the wrong impression. But there's a buzz and there's an excitement about the captains strolling down, you know, and then the flight attendants, and everyone's busy. They're all trying to get to their flights. There's an energy, and there's an energy that comes from seeing people in uniform. They've got a spring in their step, and it's exciting. I think airlines are fundamentally exciting places to be. And of course, now it's, you know, it's a much quieter place, and it just feels horrible, absolutely awful. It's so nice to see a pilot and you know, the cabin crew. And of course, you know, as we were just chatting before we started, I think that the true story is also an economic story. It's the knock-on effect. It's the domino effect of Well, if the airlines aren't flying people in, then people aren't coming to the parks. And of course, if people aren't coming, to Disneyland and Ocean Park, they're not going to the restaurants, they're not taking the buses, all these things. It has this kind of knock-on effect. And of course, it's very damaging for people's incomes and stability of homes, which is a terrible thing, as we all know. I don't know, people in the audience, who can tell me what this is? Can anyone write in what they think we're looking at here? Is this the third runway in development in Hong Kong, or is this something else? Hazel, I can see your face online there. You want to write in what you think that is? I don't see your hands moving. Is she going for the keyboard? Anyway, yes. I'll put everyone out of suspense. This is the desert at Alice Springs in Australia. This is an airplane graveyard. I hope it's not a graveyard.
Storage.
It's a parking lot.
Yeah.
So we store the airplanes in the desert because the air is dry and it slows down the corrosion.
Yeah.
But you have extraordinary number of airplanes here and in the States as well. And this is just a horrible thing. Of course, these things are really expensive, and just to be sitting there, it just tells you, look at all the brands there, Singapore Airlines and so many others as well. So, of course, what we're talking about is the fact that we're traveling less. And so I just want to share some data about what is exactly going on. So the picture is that internationally, global air passenger traffic is down a whopping 60%. Now talk about unprecedented. This is unprecedented. Now, of course, in Hong Kong, as it is the case in Singapore and much of Asia, a lot of our airlines and airports, you don't have large domestic markets. So international travel basically means that most of the air traffic closes altogether. So that number is much higher in Asia. But this is a global average, down 60% is huge. And we just talked about the aircraft in storage, up 838%. 838,000, percent, not 800%. Who's ever heard of a percentage number like that? It's unbelievable. In terms of passenger flights out of Hong Kong International Airport, it's down almost 90%. One of the world's busiest airports, down 90% year on year. And of course, as I was just talking about, Cathay's passenger capacity is down almost 99%, which is crazy. It's like a war. That's what it feels like. So make no mistake, this is we're really in unprecedented times, and as everyone's been reading in the newspapers, it's taking a huge toll on the business. I mean, we're losing money like crazy. But of course, I think if we take a humanistic point of view, as we do in marketing and communications, we need to think about how people are living, how they're living differently as well. And I think it's also you take a step back and you think about how, well, number one, how technology has changed us and how technology is changing the way we're living through this crisis. So I'm sure we can all relate to these things. Our kids, the top left-hand corner, going to school over Zoom classes. And of course, this is proving very difficult for very young children because they don't have the discipline. Parents are off working if they're lucky enough to be able to work. And, so that's not working so great. We've got all these Zoom meetings, of course, on the top right-hand side. If you go on LinkedIn, it's amazing the number of people who have those grids of all the people they've been talking to. This is now the new badge of if you're important, because you've got a grid up there of all the people you've been talking to. Social distancing, I find this quite sad, this idea of you must maintain distance, because of course, intuitively, I think what we want to do is to be close to people, and we want to at least feel close to people. That's one of the joys of life that we're being asked to keep away. And of course, we've got the dreaded masks that we all need to wear, and we've just taken ours off temporarily. But that is a strange experience to have that. Thank God the weather's cooled down a bit. So we've had that, and then of course, let's move on a little bit to kind of what we've learned. I'm just trying to click to the next slide here. There we go. Right, that was strange. So what we've learned though is that despite the fact that people can't travel because of limitations and travel bans, we can really still see that there is a desire for people to travel, and this is fascinating. and to understand what the origin of this desire is. So this is interesting if you look at this chart. So what you'll see is that, of course, there's people who are, leisure travel, about 41%, and then 3%, almost 50% or 45%. They've cancelled all travel, or they're planning to travel less than before. But what's even more fascinating than that to me is that almost 40% have no plan to change their travel intention at all. So this is, maybe how important travel is to people. And then this is what I don't understand. 20%, 1 in 5, plan to travel more than they wanted to travel before. I'm not quite sure where that comes from, but that's a fascinating thing. And of course, in business, it's quite different because, of course, people perhaps tend to travel. They need to travel perhaps when they don't even want to travel for business. So you have got a much bigger number there for business. 60% plan no change, and about almost 1/3 less than they planned, and then 1 in 10 more than they planned in terms of the incidence of travel. And I think what we can see though is that in a certain way, despite all of this chaos and the carnage, you can see a lot of what people really value is still hanging on. The higher order needs, the Maslow hierarchy, the love and belonging, the esteem, the self-actualization, the way that we express our identity through travel is still, I believe, is still very much strong and still beating. So what we've seen is that these travel motivations are still there. This is what our research is telling us, that why do people want to travel? When we conduct research, we can see that people, they just want novelty. It's just a different place. Get me out of a familiar environment. It's also about self-development, and you get that through travel, of course, through new experiences. It's also about escaping, relaxation, and of course, for so many of us, just like our story of Teresa and I, so many people are actually married to people who have relationships, but people from different cultures, and their families are spread out all around the world, and you have these terrible stories of fathers and daughters, young daughters, they haven't seen each other for 8 months. It breaks your heart, So these are all the things that people, still want to travel for, which you can really understand. And I find that kind of quite heartwarming. So with that in mind, what we felt is, we've been doing a lot of communication around, of course, it's safe and all those kinds of things. But because we understand that people still really enjoy travel, we wanted to keep that alive. We wanted to feed that instinct. And we did it with a little campaign. There's some sound for this. I don't know, can we turn the sound on? Yamo saying. More. Okay. Anyway.
There should be sound.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's just a guitar soundtrack. And I think the whole point of this, and it was very successful. It was amazing because we actually just shot it through our crew and through our agency colleagues just with their iPhones in home. So I might just play it again if that's okay.
Yeah,
it's just fun. And so when your home is your world, what do? You look around for signs of inspiration. So a crumpled up blanket can be Mount Fuji, the orange peel. Had a big debate about what should be doing. So, and of course that is how you get inspired by things. You get inspired by the things you see around you every day. People love this because I think it wasn't pretentious. It was just a very humble thing, but it had, I think, in it, you like to think there's an insight in there somewhere. So Till We Fly Again. And it was just a...
I like this tag.
Yeah, it's a lovely one. It was just an ode, it was just a shared pain.
Yes.
We just reached out to everyone and said, until we fly again, let's just dream about it. A little paper plane there with a brush wing drawn in green texture. And then, of course, what we did is we took that further. We took it into social media with Instagram, and we built all these new filters, which were fun, just to kind of use new technology to help people imagine, well, where do you want to fly? Where's the places that you want to fly to? And you can use this technology to kind of scan through and find the place you want to fly to. It's super fun. So that's just taking an old insight, but multiplying it with new technologies, filters. That's fun. Yeah. So that went well for us too. And we've also had some fun with this. So, you know, cafes had these signature cocktails for many, many years. And what we did is we shared the secret. I'm not sure. It's like really difficult to crack the secret, but it's just fun to tell, to make these things at home. Rather, if you can't get them on board, then maybe you can make them from home. And that was just a fun way that we reached out to. So, but the thing is, what's really interesting to get into some of the psychology around this safety issue. Of course, a lot of people do want to travel, but many don't. And if you look at it by country, what you can see is quite a big interval, an inconsistency between the comfort level between some countries and other countries. So in China, of course, who've recovered so quickly, they're almost like, hey, we're already traveling, no problem. And then I think in the UK and the US, for social reasons, they're much more independent societies. They believe in personal liberty and all these kinds of things to a really strong degree, and they didn't want anything to hold them back. But in many societies, it's really dropped down to about kind of half. The sound is unstable. Okay. I wonder if that's just my accent or is that the technology? Maybe I can speak more slowly. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this is interesting, is to understand why. So let's get into that. What are the drivers? And here, what I'd like to share with everyone is what we think is a very important way that we as human beings responding to the situation. There's the facts, but there's the fears, and which are stronger. Like this, we're all replete with data that where mentality driven. In terms of the fear, these are some of the fears. This is not a cafe plane, but we can all relate to this image that you're in a packed plane, and what you have is this breathing. Heard that? And inside is saying, "Oh, I was ill." Well, I because you're breathing in everybody else's air. This is standing because people. Sorry to build on that. What we're seeing is come back in the travel. They want to they're in the plane. That they can't hear. So
the connection.
Just give us a moment. Mic is not receiving properly. Should I move it up?
Yeah, let's try.
Everybody. Oh, the magic trick.
高啲.
Is that right? Like that?
Yeah.
Or is it meant to be the other way around?
Yeah, it should be okay, but yeah, just now is right. But
okay.
If you don't mind, right,
Sure.
higher up.
Okay.
Yep.
Test. Okay.
Yep.
Everyone online, can you let us know if you can hear that? Okay, cool.
Cool.
All right.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, back to the show.
Yeah.
So what we've heard is that people want to minimize their time in the cabin. And what that means is that people think the cabin is dangerous. So what's interesting is just the facts, and I appreciate that not everybody knows this, but I find it extraordinary, despite the number of people flying, the number of flights all this year, there's still not one single confirmed case of a COVID-19 contraction that's taken place in the plane, because they've tracked back every case, and it's all been traced back to an infection that took place before the plane. So then you might say, well, that's extraordinary. How could that be? Well, the thing is because it's how the plane operates. And I've got this little snazzy graphic here to help explain. There's a few reasons for this. The one is the direction of air. Actually, the air vent that pushes out the air is above everybody, and it goes out above your head and then it sucks in below. So what it does, it creates a corridor of air that's vertical that pulls the air down in a vertical corridor.
So it's not circulating around.
There's nothing that pushes it horizontally, and this is a very important one factor. Another factor is that everyone is facing forward. So unlike in a restaurant where people ironically think it's much safer, but actually that's when you're facing each other. In a plane, you're all facing one direction. So you're never really speaking into someone's face and no one's speaking into your face. And of course, then what you have is the barrier of the seat. So any droplet projectile is met with a barrier in front of you. And this is all pre-masks, all this data. So even with masks, it's even more safe. But the last killer is that the air is filtered in a way that only surgical operating theaters are filtered with a thing called a HEPA filter, which is a high efficiency particle filter. And what that does is it filters out 99.99% of particles, including viruses. And what we know that viruses are even smaller than bacteria.
And that's even pre-coronavirus.
Yeah, this is
it's always the case. Yeah.
Always the case. It's been that all modern aircraft have it, not just Cathay planes. So this explains why there hasn't been any cases in the airplane. So that's the fact. Of course, getting it out is not so easy because people's fears are so dominant. And so here's something else that's interesting. So this is recent data from the Aviation Industry Association. So this is extraordinary, right? The air in the modern aircraft, in fact, is 2 times more healthy, safer for you than the air in a classroom. People are concerned about flying, but they're not concerned about children going to school.
Yeah.
But it gets worse. It's 3 times safer than where we are now, Mike.
Yeah.
But I don't want to put my mask on just yet. Yeah. So 3 times safer, but get this, it gets worse. We all go shopping, right? We all go to the mall because we think we're in an open air space, but actually the data shows that the air in the cabin is 8 times safer than a mall or a supermarket. Again, because you're in an inside space. Supermarket. Yeah. Of course, they don't have the filters and people are moving around. But here's the killer. 12 times safer than an office space. So again, I agree. We've got to get it out there. But Cathay's taken my budget away, people, because we're losing so much money. So we're relying on social media to get it out. But you're absolutely right. We do need to get that out there. So it's extraordinary, right? And it just counters, your all of our thinking.
It's really pleasant surprise.
It is. It is. So, but together we need to just be driven by science, not by our fears or not by our child's mind understanding of the shape of a plane, intuiting that because it's horizontal, the air goes horizontally, when really it doesn't go that way at all. So, and so what that means, of course, is this is changing the behavior and the mentality of people who are prepared to travel. People are looking for reassurance. Whether or not these things provide them the safety, it's a mental alibi. It's like the idea of I go for a jog on the weekend, therefore I'm healthy. It's that kind of mentality. It's just a rational alibi. So people are saying, I'll take extra precaution by wearing protective equipment. Whether or not that protective equipment is necessary or not, but people feel that they're more safe by taking it, which of course is perfectly fine, whatever you've got to do. Other people are saying, about 1 in 3 are saying, I won't travel now, but I will as soon as the travel restrictions are lifted. These are more the laggards, not the early adopters. And here's an interesting one. This is global data. I'm going to tell you a funny story. 1 in 3 will say, I'll take extra precautions by not taking food and drink because they think that the food and drink maybe has been packed in a way or the interaction with the crew exposes them to a risk. But here's a funny thing. This is a global data. But when we've done this study amongst customers in Asia and in Hong Kong, what we find is that because Hong Kong people love this food so much,
Yeah.
that number is a lot lower.
Oh,
Because
okay.
yeah, because in Hong Kong people just say, I can't go without a good meal.
Yeah.
So I just find that also heartwarming, because Asians just love their food so much. I think it's just great. 21%. As long as the flights are available, I have no concerns about flying. I think these are the in the minority. Now here's another interesting thing. Now there's a whole body of thought around herd theory and about adoption theory and how many of us are actually not really driven by information at all. We're really just driven by the behavior of other people.
Yeah.
And this really explains,
especially with social media.
Especially with social media. And then exactly. So is it safe? Well, if the crowd are doing it, it's safe. But of course, that could be quite dangerous. You can all just be doing a dangerous thing together. So what this data shows, I'm sorry, the writing is a bit small, but I can explain it. So what it shows is that for people who have traveled in the last month, that's the red line, from the date of their travel, then the time of their next travel, which is one notch on, is that red line. And that accelerates much more steeply. The faint gray line is for people who haven't traveled yet. And what you find is that their date of next adoption is much more lagged. So travel itself proves to people that I didn't die, I didn't get COVID, I'm fine, no one else got COVID. Oh, seeing is believing, ergo I'm safe. I can go on and do it. And of course, what that does is it creates the word of mouth effect. Oh yeah, it's fine, I took a trip, I'm perfectly fine. But of course, that hasn't worked so far because of the travel restrictions. There's so few people traveling, you don't have the engine of people saying, oh, I got back, I'm perfectly fine. So this is why the travel bubble I'm going to talk about later is so important as a pump primer, as a catalyst to demonstrate that people are perfectly fine traveling. And here's another interesting thing. This is from the survey in terms of traveling, easing anxiety. How did your flight or hotel experience influence your feeling about traveling again? Well, actually, 11%, 1 out of 10 said not at all concerned. And 50%, 1 out of every 2 said, I actually feel safer now and I will travel without any major concern. So you can see the nature of the challenge is about early adoption. It's not about convincing everyone. Once you convince some people, those people will go and convince everybody else, and then we carry on. But I guess we've always known that that's how marketing works anyway, right? That's why you try and market to the trendy kids, and then they'll tell everybody else for you. You don't have to reach everybody directly. So to wrap up this little section, it's very interesting because whilst there are very deep psychological drivers that go to our concept of ourself, about what travel does for us, it's about who we are and feeds our idea of my sense of belonging and tribe and discovery. But at this point in time, people's rational minds have become so fixated by fear. Maslow's hierarchy has inverted. And now the topmost important thing is actually physiological. The people are actually really driven by fear. 1 out of every 2 feel like I'm not prepared to travel because it's unsafe, when actually it isn't. And so that's the job that we have to do. We have to convince people that actually, you're talking nonsense. Of course.
Probably also the authorities as well.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about this question about how to get this done, and I think it's a great thing to debate. How do you counteract a deep fear with data, with information? It's quite a challenge because fear just travels so much further, because in psychology, of course, the behavioral scientists say we have this thing called loss aversion. We're far more motivated by fear than we are by gain. So if there's any competition between those two things, what will happen is that the fear travels faster and people are much more attuned to protect than they are to move ahead. So we know this. So you have to think about a way to reach into people's minds that is not lecturing, that's not teaching. It's just norm. It's creating norms around travel.
Yes,
I believe.
Also, normal people, if you go by with Daniel Kahneman's argument, we think with system 1, right? Basically, it's just
that's right.
Reaction. Right?
That's right. Yeah. So that's why I'm talking about herd theory. That's why I'm talking about creating a group of people who go first, and then just advertise them. Don't try and convince people with data. Okay. So so this is, you know, what we've been talking about, what we've learned, or some of what we've learned. We've learned some other things too. But, so what does it mean for the future? Well, you know, what we've learned also is that people don't just miss traveling. Of course, people do miss traveling. And there's some super funny things that we've seen, of course. Sorry, let me just go back. Oh, so there's a really funny GIF there in the middle. It's not playing for some reason, but on the left-hand side there, yeah, people, the audience might be aware that this is actually the Louvre, I believe, that has taken great works of art and they've brought them around the city in digital screens. If you can't go to the Louvre will come to you, you know, because that's what you want. And then in the middle, there's the, you know, the early stages of COVID, there were these super funny things where that looks like someone looking out the window of an airplane, right? And then what happens, it pulls back and it's actually a guy sitting next to his washing machine and he's just got a picture of these jet engines and he's just sitting there with a glass of champagne. He's just creating the effect. And on the right-hand side is quite interesting. There's Emily Goes to Paris, which I think is a pretty crap movie. But it's been so successful.
Good entertainment.
Because people are they just want to have the idea of going somewhere. You know, they really want to be, oh, I miss going to Paris, I miss going to Bangkok, I miss going to Tokyo and Haneda and all these places. And it's just exploded. And then this one on the bottom right-hand side is so funny. I don't know what people can guess that is, but that's staycations. They are hotels that you can see the writings written, you know, kind of in reverse because they're writing it on the inside of they're writing on the inside of the window, you know, happy birthday or all this kind of stuff. So of course, you know, people are having to make do because they can't travel. Oh, here it is. Sorry, here's the GIF playing. I didn't click it properly. So look at, I think it's so funny. This guy, TikToker, he's just, oops. It's his washing machine.
Now I get
I love it. It's so funny. Yeah. There he is. He's just drinking alone. He's just so missing traveling. But here's how some of the things that the airline industry has done to react. So you've had Thai Airways has gone out and created restaurants. And of course, some of these are actually just for economic reasons. They're just trying to keep their catering businesses alive because you've got all this food.
It's a good
and
idea.
you know they're trying to do that. And we've seen Singapore Airlines doing this as well. They've been delivering and they've actually created an A380 meal in their plane.
And I heard the reaction is actually like really positive.
Yeah, the reaction is actually pretty good. And then Qantas down there, they've been selling the drink carts. You know, the trolleys, the service straight from the cart concept, and you. For about $1,000 you can buy one of these carts. It comes fully loaded with all of the wine and the beer and all that kind of stuff. And on the right-hand side, there is something that we've done at the Cathay Group with HKE, Hong Kong Express, where they've had a flight and then the destination Hong Kong, right? You can see that, you know, it's just going around. Of course, that was a little bit controversial for various reasons. But something that's very interesting in terms of the design side of marketing and how marketing can be a bridge, I think, between customer needs and the company, is that COVID is actually spitting up a lot of really interesting design challenges, which is super interesting. So, you know, if you think about how airports work, you know, we have all these counters with no barriers. And of course, now we've got barriers. So how should these public spaces be designed to protect people from the current situation, but also the next one? There's going to be other issues.
Yeah.
So how does that need to work without us turning to totally digital lives? That's a very interesting question. Another thing that's happened is contactless journeys, of course. And the Hong Kong International Airport, because it's a fantastic airport, is soon to be rolling out biometric boarding, which is, you know, out there with some of the world's leading airports with this technology, which is fantastic. And of course, you want that. Not only is it more efficient, but it just stops the handing over of documents. It just reduces the risk of contact. And then, of course, hygiene and cleanliness. And we've got an armies of people out there wiping things down. And of course, people are bringing their own cleaning agents into the planes, which is really quite problematic because they're buying often the most powerful thing they can buy, and it's actually eating away at the materials in the plane. Yeah, which is a problem. And of course, then it makes the surfaces of the plane more permeable, and then of course it makes it more risky in terms of absorbing kind of germs and disease in the future. So there's lots of very interesting things. And the ways that bathrooms have been designed, of course, these were designed 10 years ago. without any concept of these kind of, high communicable diseases. I'm sorry, my laptop shut down without completing my question. All right, get a charger. So anyway, so we need to think about how bathrooms can work and how they should work. And this is an interesting thing. So, but of course, I was just talking about how the airline industry has just suffered such a body blow. All these innovations take time and they take money to implement. And this is really such an existential challenge for us because, of course, we're losing, kind of create a lot of money. So just very, very realistically, it's difficult to kind of get this stuff done. So what we're doing now is we're using data. We're using the existing systems that we have. And here's some interesting stuff. And we're using the data to understand the evolving needs that people have. And you don't have to go into the details, but what we're doing is we're using this data to understand the sentiment of different audience groups in different countries so that we can be more efficient about how we direct our marketing. Where should, because we're so stretched for money right now, we can't afford to advertise to everybody equally. When the time comes right to start traveling, we need to focus on a few things. And then what we need to do is we also have sentiment by journey tracking as well. So we can understand where the issues are across the journey. And we're also using the data to better gauge demand. So what we're doing is we're actually creating our own data models, and we've got data models that takes data from Skyscanner and from Baidu, from Google, to create basically this real-time model of which country should we activate first. And I think one of the biggest questions that's come up is this concept of the new normal. And we've heard this, I think it was McKinsey who first raised this point. And this is, I really question this. And of course, it's very sensational to say the new normal because it's quite a scary thought. Oh my God, are we going to be living like this forever? Because that's the concept of the normal. But I think before we just adopt this without challenging it, I think we have to really look at and challenge this idea. Is this the new normal? And I think I would kind of take issue with that. One thing we know is that travel will recover. So it can't be the new normal. It's just that we're in an abnormal phase. And by all accounts, all of the modeling, that travel will recover. And of course, the question is the nature of the recovery, and the latest version is going to be a K-shaped recovery. That over time that there will be a recovery, but it's not going to be a very smooth transition. So we know it's going to come back, and we know that we're going to get travel back, and that we're going to be in the skies. But something that's interesting, this is from McKinsey, and what you'll see is that there's models that, going back to that earlier concept of herd theory and adoption models, is that you're going to have regional travel is going to recover first, because that's the travel that people feel most comfortable with.
And short haul, right?
Short haul. So regional travel, short haul, and it's going to be in certain industries, and it's going to be for those sales industry people, because they're the ones, if you're not there, maybe someone else is going and claiming those sales jobs. So that's what's going to happen. And then the domestic travel is going to be the next to recover. And then the last to recover, unfortunately for us, is going to be international travel. But then for international travel, if you're like Hong Kong or Singapore, that's all you've got because you don't have any domestic market. So we're going to get a little bit of regional travel. That's our model. And that's how we see it happening. But I think travel is going to endure, ladies and gentlemen, because I think just bringing this question back to its starting point, I think it's because it's for humanitarian reasons. It's because of who we are and what we need from life. It's because like it or not, we have relationships with people in other parts of the world. And of course you want to travel to reconnect, and you have meetings, you have teams to connect with. And in our psychology now, we need to feed our sense of our soul by going to new places because we want those novel experiences. And that's why this thing that we've just announced a couple of days ago, we're super excited about this Hong Kong, Singapore travel bubble. And we've got this cute little thing, this ready bubble fly graphic. We couldn't resist, because we do love travel, and we know that people not only love the destination, they also love the travel. So this is really important. And one thing that's super interesting about this is that in a tough situation, you do have positive outcomes. So of course, Singapore is a great rival for us in Hong Kong, and Singapore Tourism Board is a great rival of Hong Kong Tourism Board. And of course, Singapore Airlines is one of the world's greatest airlines. They're a great rival to us. But now we're all working together, and we're literally working across the aisle with all these people to make it happen. And I think that's very encouraging. I think that's what it takes, right? Because that's in the greater good. That's what we should do. But it's mostly because I think that travel is not just something that we do. It's actually some part of who we are. And something that's been made, I think, in the psychology cannot be unmade. That's my learning of how things are. That we are not prepared to dial back some idea of who we are. And I think people fight like crazy for that. And so I think this is a very important thing, and that's what I understand. And the other thing I think that's also true is I think there's a little kind of GIF. Can someone click on the image? Is travel is it's not just something that's a business. I think it's actually something it's good for the world because travel helps us to understand people from other societies. It helps us to understand people from other cultures. It actually makes us nicer as people, and it actually makes the world nicer. So I think travel is very much essential for the future good of the world, and this is something that I really believe. And so it's oh, here it is. Here it's playing. This is something that's just very important to kind of get back. It's important for the world. It's not just a business. It's not just something that's nice to do. And I just want to end on this point. This is at Cathay, this is our brand purpose. It's kind of a very lofty, very lofty brand purpose to move people forward in life. And we believe that we can do this, even though it's such a lofty thing and we're just an airline. Because if you think about it, what travel does do, it does this through connecting people to meaningful people, places, and experiences. I think that's what travel does do. And as communicators, I think that we have a responsibility to the world, to society, to not just take care of the businesses, to not just keep the revenue going, which of course you do, but I think we do need to make the world better. Every one campaign at a time, every message at a time. And we do need to reconnect each other to the soul of the world. And even if it's just in a little way. And I do think that's the greater mission that we all have in marketing. In this time there's such a focus on ROI. ROI just means we keep getting the budget from the finance guys.
Yes.
But that's not why we exist. I think we exist because it's good for the world and because we're the humanity in the business. That's what we do. So that brings my talk to a conclusion.
Yeah.
I hope that's been interesting for everyone. I've very much enjoyed giving it, and I'm very happy to take comments or questions.
It is. It's definitely interesting and inspiring and reassuring in a sense, right? I think we do need that. I think the fact that you actually share with us some data, which obviously, if people can somehow be exposed to the data, right, it can be really reassuring in terms of mitigating the fear, right? Which I think is one area that probably moving forward and marketing communication does have a role here, right, in terms of moving forward.
I think this is a fascinating thing to dissect in an academic environment. I mean, what is the mechanics of persuasion? You can either use the data as your artillery to communicate your point, or you could just use it to help inform you about how people think. And maybe it just becomes the information behind the brief.
Yeah.
And then the brief could be not containing data at all, but it just is, it's more kind of psychologically derived.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing because, no one likes to be lectured at, but what people love is to be entertained. So maybe it's all about how, for example, what I'm thinking about with this Singapore travel bubble, we're currently going to film people just having fun in the plane. Yeah. And then I'm going to amplify that because maybe the antidote to all the fear is not facts. It's just, look, there's people doing it.
Yeah. Well, it's classic marketing communication challenges, right? Where you somehow has to remind people the benefit, the payoff, right, of why we travel at all, right?
Yeah.
While it's like, as you said earlier on, it's built into our DNA.
Yeah.
But the fact that we do have the urge to travel, actually what underlies that is actually our urge to connect. Yeah. Our urge to communicate.
Absolutely.
As human beings, right?
You know, and I think this reminds me that the behavioral engineers, the behavioral economists, what they say is that the charities go about eliciting charitable donations in the wrong way. If you show children who are very much, poverty stricken, what it does to the viewer, it says that nobody is donating.
Yeah.
So what it tells you is that to donate is a rebel act. You know, you're an outlier. But actually the way to get people to donate is say more and more people are donating to charities. And then what you do is you want to join in.
Yeah.
So I think that's how I'm thinking about it, is to try and give evidence, or to try and create some sense of a positive movement to this is now a normal thing. You're not weird to travel. It's safe. Everyone's doing it. And then just let word of mouth take its course.
Yeah. And obviously one of the questions or areas that we may have to think about will be, while we say it's there, right? As human being, we need to connect, and travel actually enables that and will come back, right? But at the same time, we are also tossing around with the challenge in a way that arguably life may never be the same again, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of connection, what kind of connections that we can envision as a payoff, right? Maybe something that we also have to work out, right? So that people are connecting into the future positivity, rather than just remind them of what happened in the past, which may not necessarily be the same again. Right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the learning from previous crises in the world, economic, military, what happens is the future is not worse, it's just different. Yeah. And you could argue that this travel bubble that we're talking about, and the fact that to solve the problem, we have to work together with our competitors in Singapore, I think it's a very interesting case study in what the solution may look like. There's a famous business book from years ago when I was starting out. It said marketing is war. And there was a guy in a tank and he had like a hat on, and it was very macho, it was very masculine. And he was like, you got to kill your enemy. But that is on, you can relate to part of that. It's very competitive. I understand that. But that's assuming that everything is safe. But I think what we're in now is a very uncertain environment. And to make the uncertainty go down, what we probably need is more collaboration and the idea of a collaborative economy, where the idea of that, if everyone goes back and travel, all the airlines benefit, all the hotels benefit. You don't have to just take care of your own business. You need to sell the category.
Co-creation.
Don't just sell your brand, sell the category. And I think that's what the great sport brands have always done. When you're confident, you sell the category. When you're lacking confidence, you just talk about your products and features, but it gets so small.
Yeah, definitely. It's a human thing. Right?
Yeah.
It's not an individual operator's thing. Right?
Anyway, I'm conscious that there's some questions have come in, and I've totally lost track of time, and I don't know how much time we have. So
definitely we can take some questions.
Should we ask, answer some of the questions?
Yes, please.
How do we do this? Why don't you choose which ones?
Questions from Polly, right? Thanks, Ed. I like the idea of reminder the joy of travel. At the same time, do you have any plan to work back Hong Kong travelers' heart and drive brand preference and affinity towards cafe after COVID?
Well, yes, of course. And, with the resizing at Cathay, of course, I mean, this is, that's going to definitely impact people's feelings toward Cathay. I can understand that. And it's been a very upsetting experience for us at Cathay, to lose colleagues and things like that. So that's something that, it's just there. But I don't think there's any airline in the world that hasn't had to restructure, because airlines are such expensive things. And if you don't have people flying, there's simply no way in the future that no one would have a job with no restructuring. So what the guys at the top level of the company are telling us this is what we have to do, and I absolutely believe it. So I think what we're trying to do is we are planning to work toward, well, it's not a new strategy. I just think it's something that we've been wanting to do for a long time. I firmly believe that any large company, any business operates in a social context. And ultimately, I think businesses, they have a social license to operate, not formally so, but informally. And I think that you have to earn that. And you know, I think fundamentally you earn that by being a good company, by being reliable, by being trustworthy and having good products and services. But I think it's also about building bonds with the community, and it's about doing things that the community value. And of course, you know, and spending money on things doesn't just go to your bottom line. It's just about sharing your facilities and sharing your infrastructure. So, you know, we've been doing things, you know, with Clock and Flat for many years. We started a program where we created a cafe, Take the Stage, whereas Clock and Flat were for established bands. We set up a program where we invited people, you know, who weren't professional singers to come and have their time on stage. For example, we sponsored the Rise conference and created grants for startup businesses who they could, by applying, and when we selected them based on the strength of their application, and then we paid for all their listing fees at the conference. And after that, we flew them to conferences around the world at no cost to help people make more contacts, more business contacts, to help people. So I think we very much want to be associated with that up and coming generation. We want to be meaningful. We want to be helpful and help people who maybe haven't made it yet to help make it. And of course, we're doing it. We're sponsoring the Hong Kong Olympic team, and we sponsor the sports federations as well, which is all those people who are not necessarily, you know, at the global level yet, but we can help them get there. And this is something I very much want to continue doing. I think that's what we should do. And yeah, super important.
Sure.
Yeah.
Shall we actually take one more question from the chat, right, before we also open the questions to the floor?
Sure.
Right. The other questions is from Leung Wei San. Thank you, Ed. What do you think with the rise of staycation? How do you think it would pose a threat to the traveling or even airline industry, especially for the short-term travelers who just prefer to have a brief break from work?
Yes.
Which is so,
Yeah. Well, I mean, and thank God for staycations. You know, sometimes you just go crazy living in your own little place. Yeah, I think immediately it is more of a threat than in the longer term. But ultimately, you know, our friends in the hotel industry, I mean, these are people who they've also been suffering as well. So, you know, I think that we work very much in collaboration with the hotel industry. So we're very happy that they're helping out. And in fact, when travel restrictions are lifting again, we will be announcing a promotion where we'll be giving away a large number of tickets with the help of the Hong Kong Airport Authority, actually, to help people travel to the world. But what we're also doing prior to that is Asia Miles is giving away miles to encourage people to go and spend in the local restaurants and in the local hotels, because that's just good for the hospitality industry, and that's good for Hong Kong. So that's true. But I think in, you know, what's happened is, as I was saying before, I think people love to travel, and actually data I didn't show is that people from Hong Kong want to travel more than most other people from Asia. So because I think it's part of our habit in Hong Kong to travel, particularly to Japan and Taiwan for all those great things. So I think what we believe will happen, of course, people will do staycations, but I think people are just going to want to travel. And with the travel bubble that's recently gone on sale, there's a tremendous interest in traveling to Singapore. So there's a lot of pent-up demand, and people are going to want to travel. I don't have any doubt about that. I think for work, what I think is going to happen is that it's interesting. Here's a prediction. I think the telephone call and conference calls are going to end. That's going to move into video calls. But I don't think video calls are going to take the place of traveling for business, even though that's what everybody tells me, the new normal. I don't believe it. Because what travel is when you travel for business, it's not just about being there in the room, and that's important. It's also a gesture that when I'm traveling to see you as my client, my customer, I'm also telling you that I value this business. And that's why I've spent the money and the time to be there. And if you don't do that, but your competitor does, then maybe the competitor gets the business, and then it becomes very competitive. So I think it's just a matter of time, just like all those models. Business travel will, step by step, it'll come back. I think that's
well, it's also a question of really be there and getting to know the market. That's getting to know the people and the consumer. Right.
That's right. Yeah. And of course, being in a room in a meeting is totally different from a screen or a Zoom. Yeah. When you're in the room, you have your peripheral vision. I can see, someone rolling their eyes. What's this guy talking about? Maybe someone over there is like soft clapping. That's all how you understand, human beings making decisions. And I think that's the power of being there.
Yeah, and related to that will be what our perspective of how, for example, team building can actually be made possible.
Right.
Because right now, a lot of people are creating team building through the virtual world, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe in the long run, this cannot be just the only platform to actually help people connect with each other. In the end, we do need to connect physically, right?
I think so, because I agree, Mike, because I think it's like what's the mentality behind choosing to go and have dinner with someone? What's the meaning of that act? Yeah. Of course, it's not about feeding yourself. Yeah. Because it's a choice. And I choose to spend that time with you. And it's a gesture. So team building works best when the team comes together, not because they have to, but because they choose to. Yeah. And I think that's why it's powerful. And that's why people love it. That's why it's not going to go anywhere. And I think these Zoom meetings, that's just about communication. That's perfunctory. Yeah. But the emotional business of we're a team and we choose to fight for each other because we like each other and we're stronger together, that comes from the expression of the gesture that I've invested in this thing. And that can only really happen by people making that choice to be together. Yeah. That's why I think it's eventually it has to go back where it was. So I don't believe in the new normal. I call
there's still
bullshit on that.
One question, which probably also another way to see new normal, is related to globalization and deglobalization from Ni Yang, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for your wonderful sharing. Do you think, right, international travel and aviation industry will be affected by the deglobalization trend, not only physically caused by COVID, but also politically?
Well, I guess, there's swings and roundabouts on the political side. There's tension somewhere and there's not tension somewhere else. I imagine that evens out over time. And in the grand scheme of things, I think as human beings, we just hate to lose something that we've had. That loss aversion is very strong. And if you think about all the businesses that are set up now and all the prosperity that comes from not just selling to your domestic market. If you've got a great product or a great service, why not sell it across the border? Why not sell it, not just to people in Hong Kong, but to people in Singapore? Of course, that's a no-brainer. And what happens in the digital age, we have this idea that we are a global people. So the idea that goods and services move around the world, I just think is an instinctive thing. I don't think you can put that back you can't put that genie back in the bottle. Once that's out, that's out. And I think, one thing you learn, I think, from corporations too, or maybe from all our, we hate having a pay cut, it maybe you can survive on where you are, but you don't want to go back from where you are. So I think businesses don't want to let go of people, of course. They don't want to lose customers. So no one's going to want to go back. So I don't think deglobalization is really a fundamental strong trend. But I do think what will happen is there's going to be an increased sensitivity around buying some things locally. Fruit, produce, for example. Maybe it makes more sense to buy your fruit and vegetables and meat from your vertically integrated local suppliers rather than flying that all around the world.
Yeah, that's true.
I think this is also true. And I think this is, you have to say it's also a good thing. But at the end of the day, I think what people have is choice. And I think what people want is choice. And that's fair enough. You know, why not provide choice for people? So, you know, maybe what happens in the future is that maybe there needs to be a label that this is, you know, this is an imported good, and it should be more expensive.
Yeah.
And that maybe pays for the carbon offset for flying it in. And that's also fair too, you know, and I think that's where we're going as an airline industry as well, our responsibility.
And actually, Polly give you a feedback on your answer. Thank you for your answer, right? And actually, I also like what Ed said, grow the category, right? But not product. And we have confidence on that, right? That's reassuring. Yeah.
Well, you know what's interesting? Thank you, Polly, for your answer to your question. But you know what's fascinating about that is, this is another thing to debate, is actually when you're lacking confidence in your company, like right now, Cathay, you know, we've really taken a blow. It takes a certain strength to think big.
Yeah.
In times like that, because of course, no one argues when you say, let's reduce spending. No one ever says, let's just focus on destination ad and price point. No one's going to say that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
But it takes, I think, uncommon vision and confidence of even the finance, you know, your financial controller to say, yes, at this point in time when we're really have so many concerns, let's invest in the long term. That is, I don't think, very common in the world. So that's what we're trying to do. That's what I'm fighting for. And I think I'll have the support of my colleagues at Cathay, because I think Cathay has been, it's been fighting for 10 years, a kind of like a tougher and tougher business. So many airlines have. But, you know, not until you get out of those category conventions, not until you get out of just having price wars, can you inspire people? You can't inspire people by cheaper flights. It just gets smaller and smaller. It just goes, you know, it just becomes tighter and tighter.
So let's open the discussion to the floor. Anyone could like to give Ed some questions, not necessarily through the chat.
Evening, Ed and Mike. I'm Emily.
Hi, Emily.
It's really impressive talk, and I really appreciate the Till We Fly Again, that video. I have one question.
Fly to Singapore, right?
Yeah, I'm deciding to fly, and I will choose Cathay Pacific rather than Singapore Airport. But I have one question about the PR issues. As far as I know, on the first 15 days, there will be only one flight from Singapore to Hong Kong and one from Hong Kong to Singapore. And on the 16th day, there will be 4 flights. But if the daily number of unlinked local cases is more than 5 for both Singapore and Hong Kong, the bubble will be cancelled. So how will the Cathay Pacific deal with the new challenges? For example, will you change the refund policies and other policies to make your customers more comfortable and more like Cathay Pacific?
Oh, Emily, I think you're very well read and up to date with the latest developments. Yeah, you're right. I can't criticize that mechanism in the travel bubble agreement at all, because I think one of the reasons why Hong Kong and Singapore are offering the first travel bubble in Asia is because of the discipline and the systems and the cautiousness. And I think if you look at what's happening in Europe and in the United States, I mean, the horse has bolted out. There's no point in shutting the gate after that. And I think what we have is the ability to open up, but we have to do it very, very carefully. And I think that that's in a little bit of the same way that Mike and I were talking about this new era of collaboration between Singapore Airlines and Cathay and Singapore Tourism Board and Hong Kong Tourism Board. I think what we also have is almost like a shared responsibility between the public and Cathay Pacific to make sure we work together to make it successful. So we don't trigger that circuit breaker clause and the number of infections do increase. And then we have to stop the bubble. We have to burst the bubble. So I think that this is an interesting situation that we're in, where it's like it calls for a kind of a trust, a mutual responsibility between both. So say, for example, if someone didn't do the test properly, or they came into the airline and they're in the plane and they took off their masks and they're walking around, or they weren't washing their hands, that's going to increase the risk level. And if people do those kinds of things, then that kind of behavior could jeopardize everybody. So that's how we're thinking about it. And what we've done, if you go to our website, we've got a special page now on the travel bubble. We've created a lot of infographics, and there'll be checklists of exactly what you need to do so that we can help guide people step by step through the quite complicated process. But that's what we can do. That's what we can control. What we can't control is the world out there. And, we can only control what we can control. But in terms of things that's within our domain, we're working very hard at it, and we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to do the right thing. And so we can hopefully keep it all going. Yeah.
Indeed, thank you. It's really a mutual responsibility. If we want to fly to Singapore, we have to do 4 times test and apply for air travel pass. A lot of things to do. But I hope the travel bubble. I hope the travel bubble is long lasting. Yeah,
me too. So with one bubble, other bubbles can grow. Yeah. So I want to help you guys get back to Japan and get back to
that will be great.
Have the the ramen and all that yummy stuff in Japan, but we've got to do our homework first. Yeah.
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah. Any further questions from the floor?
Lamgan.
Okay.
Someone speaking.
Hazel,
Hi.
right?
Yeah. Hello, Mr. Bao. Thank you so much for sharing. I'd like to know, would you mind sharing with us the recent the challenges your PR team is facing, and also the PR strategies behind the recent events that CX is facing? For example, the shutdown of Dragon Air and the new restructure. The new restructure of CX, and also the controversial new crew member contract. Thank you.
Sure. Some of these things are above my pay grade, Hazel, so I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask them, because really, quite honestly, in my role, I'm really, my job is to focus on customer acquisition, and I don't take care of that area. But I think what I can say is that I think, there's no doubt that Cathay's just been in a tough situation. And I think all the PR strategy is really just to try and do our best to explain the situation that we're in as best we can, so that people can understand that in a tough situation, you have to make tough decisions. And I think that's the strategy, is just to try and help people to understand, what situation that we're facing, and to try and just be really honest with people. So that's about as much of that as I understand. I'm actually not involved in any of those discussions, and I think to say more than that, I'd just be speculating. But that's what I know and what I understand and what I believe. I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Hazel. Okay. Any further questions?
I actually want to follow up with Hazel's question. So how do you, like, as a on the PR side, how do you ensure that with the reconstruction of the company to ensure customers on the service and other aspect of CX service?
Sorry, I don't understand your question. You say, how do we restructure?
So especially, maybe ensure the confidence of customers on the service of CX.
Oh, well, I can talk about that. I mean, we just have to rebuild. You know, and all I can think to do is there's no magic ad, there's no photograph that makes it all better. I think it's just about being a good airline and being earning people's trust by being good at what we do. And I look from my perspective, I think I know, because I'm at Cathay every day, I know how hard everybody works in a tough environment to be as good as we can be. And there's a tremendous range of improvements that have been introduced into the services, the F&B and the aircraft and things like that. So there's a lot of work that's gone into to win people's choice and to be their best choice. And I think on the communication and marketing side, our job is really just to help communicate those truths and to help people understand why we think we're a good choice for people. And I think that's really our focus in terms of that side. Actually, our communication structure, just to spend maybe a few more seconds talking about it, but our structure is, we call it love, choose, and buy. The love level is really where we're talking about our purpose, our mission, and these bigger values that we have, which is really about can-do, thoughtful, can-do spirit, thoughtful, and those values. And then we really communicate that, and we try and bring that to life through everything that we do. Then what we have beneath that is we have a level of choose communications, which is more focused on products and services. And that's where we're talking about the tangible reasons, you know, the way we design the seat, or the new restaurant partnerships that we have, you know, the new menu choices, all these little things. And also the destinations and the promotions, the price points. And then what we have is the buy level is just kind of helping people to click on this and to make it easy to buy. And we hope that the combination of those things works. That's really how the marketing works. But I don't think there's any magic to any of that. At the end of the day, it's just trying to us understand what we think we're good at and how we think we're good. And then just to simply communicate that to people. And of course, people make the choices that they want to make. And I think that's our job, is to win people's trust and win their loyalty. And I hope we'll do that.
Okay. Thanks, Iris.
Thanks, Iris.
Yeah. So do we have one or two more questions? Yep. If not, I think we can call it the day, right? It's a really inspiring talk from Ed. I feel a lot more reassured looking forward, and the possibility that we can connect and communicate with travel, right? Honestly, like a lot of people, there have been times that we are so pessimistic, right? With those images, with all the goggles, all the protective shields, and all those on the airplane. But well, we are moving on, right? Like what you just talked about, the brand and the customer connections, right? We just have to move on, right? With effort, with genuine contribution, right? Which is actually what we all have to do, and that's actually very Hong Kong spirit as well. Yeah. So really, thank you for coming all the way to the campus to share with us.
It's my pleasure. So thank you, Mike, for having me, and thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for your questions.
Yes, and we have a simple souvenir presented to you by the director of the school, Mr. Professor Francis Lee. Yeah. Yeah. Shall we just all stand up?
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot
Oh, you're welcome.
for inspiring talk. Okay.
Maybe you
Thank you, Francis.
go with it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Just put this microphone in my pocket there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we anyone taking photos?
1, 2, 3. Yeah, 1. I mean, you can
Okay,
stand up.
yeah, cool.
1, 2, 3. Yep, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed.
That's-
Thank you, Ed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's actually a keyboard. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Good for your new home, right?
Yeah.
Good, right?
Well, we drink
Yeah.
a lot of tea.
Yeah. It's
Okay,
good. Yeah.
No.
Okay. Yeah. So thanks everybody for participating in this very inspiring talk. Yeah. And thank you, Ed. Yeah. And thank you, Francis. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. 我就先要嚟。